I think it was, now I get dates mixed up a little bit, but that's when, around the time when Letter from a Birmingham Jail comes through. And his philosophy, which I take to heart, which is very important to me as being not an African American and being a teacher. So middle class, non-African American. And he kind of addresses this kind of person in the letter to from Birmingham jail. And he talks about how the tension of oppression must be lifted up and exposed. And so and he talks about in the middle of the letter how there is this moderate liberal, middle class liberal in the world who wants change, who will march with you, who will say I'm with you. And then he talks about how but they value peace over justice. Peace over justice. Now, this comes to me as a teacher in the classroom. This is a critical moment to think through as a non-African American, that what is my interest on a day-to-day basis? And it is peace. And so I have to be explicit with myself in understanding that I can't let that be my goal on a day-to-day basis. In the position that I have, teaching the children that I teach, I must always allow their voices to be heard. I must always try to help them understand how they can be heard at a higher levels, and how that they can have the capacity to kind of push back systemically, not just kind of, and so there's a lot of pressure on me on a daily basis to resist this idea that I just want to go to work and get home. I just want to go to work, get my paycheck and come home. Okay, because then that puts me on the wrong side. And people like King have helped me understand that being passive can make me an aggressor and part of the oppressive system. So I've taken that very, very seriously. And so in that, and I'll kind of move just about, I think maybe 5 more minutes. So in that letter, what he talks about is that we have to create tension in the community, because Aaron Ike is not the only one who just wants everything calm. Actually, the majority of all of our communities want calm. There's Black people who want calm. Okay, but if there are crises in the community, it is a community's organizer's job to find those people, find the injustice that created that, and then come up with plans to attack that injustice until you can get it out of the way. And you remove these barriers one by one, one by one, one by one. And so you get to a point where the people who can relax can't anymore, because there's crises in your community. And then you get those people, ideally you get those people to say, we should address these at some point. Let's address these issues. And you can't argue that King wasn't successful, because all of the changes at the local levels that he saw, all of the legislation that he saw at the national level, now you can't, even he would say, and this is how I'm going to finish, he wasn't done. Okay, anybody can say, well, there was a lot more work to do. Well, he agreed with that. Okay, because every time he got a barrier down, he saw another barrier in place. But he never lost hope and said, well, there's just too many. He just said there's a new one, and that just helps me understand where we were supposed to be fighting in the first place. So early in his life, segregation was the key problem. It was dehumanizing. It was an attack on Black people just in who they were, what they looked like, wherever they were. And so when he gets through that, and it gets, you get into the middle 1960s, and you begin to see that there's a lot of changes happening as far as integration, segregation, but there's still real problems. There's still real problems. And this leads to the second kind of phase of King's life, where I'll kind of lead to an end here in my presentation. That he began, so integration wasn't he called I saw a speech that he said, he was referring to James Baldwin. James Baldwin's one of my favorite authors. I've never heard anybody call him anything different. He called him Jimmy Baldwin. Jimmy Baldwin, he called him. He said, Jimmy Baldwin often says that we were going to integrate ourselves into a burning house, right? Like, we want integration in many ways, but what have we got out of it? because in some ways, and Malcolm X said, you know, you want to see who's going to destroy the white man's country, it's going to be the white man, because you can see it. And in a way, like in 2021, I mean, it's crazy what's going on in this country. And it's certainly not, you know, black people's fault or poor people's fault. It's crazy though. Maybe it's a collapse, maybe it's not. We'll see, right? But King wouldn't have been worried that he wouldn't have been worried about whether that's going to happen or not. He's worried about the people on the ground. And so what he did, and I thought for me it's inspiring, is that he began to say economic issues are now the issue. Thank goodness we have integration. Thank goodness we got rid of it was a win, but we have a lot more. There's a distant path that we have to keep going down, and that is economic justice. We need to make sure that everybody has a job waiting for them. Everybody has opportunity. Everybody can realize their potential. Everybody has a decent wage. Everybody is able to take care of their family. Nobody is working a full-time job being treated horribly. Okay, and so when the last kind of breadth of King, where he gave one of the most famous speeches besides "I Have a Dream" is at the mountaintop. I've been at the mountaintop, where he was killed the next day. That was in Memphis, and in that struggle was a union struggle. That was about working with mostly black workers in Memphis to try to win them a contract. And so that's one of these things that it's like it's the next stage. It's don't give a man a fish, teach a man to fish. Because you get these guys to form a union, and then you can walk away. King can walk away. And these guys cannot. They have an infrastructure built up where they can empower themselves to get what they need to feed their families. And that was really where he ended his life. So for me as a union person, it's my goal to get not just me as a teacher fighting for individual black students, but for me to get the union, the teachers union, to really take stands in the community, labor-wise, right? Put labor on the line to say that we need job guarantees for our kids in this community. We need $15 minimum wage for our community. You know, we need to, and then we can talk about this maybe at some point other than today, but we don't need any more jails in our community. We don't need them. And I know that there's like different sides of this issue, but my goodness, it's like at the core of what creates such high populations in prisons in the United States. We have the highest prison population in the entire world. This is the three things that King said were absolutely wrong with the United States. He said, and it's all one package, and I'll finish. But he said racism, poverty, and militarism. Those were the three kind of issues that all came together that created oppression so that people could not fulfill their potential, and that ultimately really created a situation in the United States where it's going to be an explosion someday. And so it's up to us to deconstruct racism, and that means deconstruct institutions of incarceration. That means construct opportunities, education, systems of education, systems of decent pay, unionization, things of that sort. So yeah, that's all. I could say more, but I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. So as a question, I know not a lot, this might be the first time a lot of people might hear a lot of this stuff. So how can we as people, start to make these steps going forward?
I think as far as I'm concerned, we have to create organization. And I think it's out there. There's organization, I'm saying literal organizations that take stands in the community that we get justice immediately. So I don't know if it's a nonprofit, but that brings together the various organizations. And there's certain things that we need in the city of Racine. That's what King never said it, but he did it, which is to think globally but act locally. So we all like to watch what's going on at the national level. Kind of are interested in the big stars of the world, but really our power is in the city of Racine. And we need to think about what our agenda is. collectively? Is it a higher minimum wage? Is it a job guarantee? Is it a group I was working with said no more, you cannot fine youth. We're trying to get that through the city, and it didn't work, not the first time. But giving fines to youth in the city of Racine, things like that. So what do we do today? I think you do what Scott Terry's doing. You do whatever you got right now. You try to build that up into a position. But I think ultimately within the next year, couple of years, we need organization in this community. If that makes sense.
That makes sense. That makes sense. I love it. Anybody else have any questions for him on what he brought up? Yeah, but I did have because I know you spoke up from like a teacher's point of view. So what about the other, like those of us that might not be in the school system or not have that kind of job that we're specifically working as a teacher of some sort? So how could they do something in their workplace?
If in their workplace? Now this is what I'm gonna say it, but it makes people uncomfortable. But I do believe that this would be in the legacy of King, is that we need organized workplaces. We need unions in the workplace. It's nice. It's like there's this huge push in the school system for entrepreneurialism. And I think it's wonderful because it gets to creativity, just like today. It's a day of creativity. I love that. Okay. But what King pointed out was without an economic floor that is with dignity, then entrepreneurialism becomes hollow to a certain degree. We have to make sure that everybody's okay. And the only way we do that is if we organize at our workplaces. So I don't care if it's a small business, it's a small business. But there's all kinds of, like, there's McDonald's, there's Burger King, there's Arby's, there's factories, there's Cree, there's all these places where people are working on a daily basis and they have no real power. And so I think that if I was going to give any advice to just a worker in this community, people going to work every day just trying to do their best, is that we need to think about unionism, and that creates a community of workers that can stand up for themselves. And then once you stand up for yourself, this is the beauty, because once you stand up for yourself and you get some wins, then you can see that you have power. And once you see you have power, you have no excuse to step back from it. Once you see you have that power, then you know you can have change, not just for your money or your wages, but you can change the system of incarceration. You could change the system of policing in this community. Once you know you have that power, and I think unionism is the way to
do it. I love that idea. And I always thought about, like, it's always a big thing to make your own stuff. I like how you point that out. And I think, especially like me, maybe not being in the field of education like that, but always you can make your own field a field of education. There's never a time where you can't educate. Because I know me as a tutor, I tutor math, but I always, like, I know the past week I've been trying to get my students to just be thinking about other things, because math has a big component in life, but life is most important, and trying to get them to understand, like, day-to-day things. Maybe I know one of my students, I'll play a game with him where I'll give them some numbers, like this is how much you have per month to spend. Like, we'll kind of play a game of life, like what will you do if this happens? Okay, what will you do if this happens? Say you have to pay for this and this. Which one are you going to pay for? Or are you going to work more hours? At a younger age, teaching them that the world, how to handle money at a young age. Like, I know he's in 7th grade and he is like trading on the stock market already, and trying to teach them younger how to just how to self-educate yourself. I'm a big advocate in self-education, because I know a lot of students, once they get to college, they're just like, oh, the professor, they just make me read my own book and teach myself. But that's the beauty of it, the teaching you how to teach yourself. Because a lot of stuff people are not going to teach you. There's so many things that I've been learning that no one ever taught me. It takes your own motivation, on your own passion to go out and look for it.
That's right. You know, we have instituted at Unified this day of reality check day. It's called. It's the last 3 years. It's beautiful in many ways because they teach them. They like give them a certain. They give them a tablet and then an identity, and then they get certain like updates throughout the day about how much they're making, how much is in the bank, how much the bills will cost, all this stuff. And let me say this because I think that's vital because I think about that on a regular basis. How am I going to feed myself? And if you can't feed yourself, you know, there's no community organizing. It becomes, you know, just very difficult. So, but what I noticed, you know, is that like 70% of the people behind the table doing the teaching, they were all part of a union at one point, and they were all one of them. They're all like going to have these pensions. There was like former police and former teachers and former administrators, but there was nothing. So how did these pensions get in place? A pension, right, that says you can work, you can stop working at the age of 55 and 60 years old. You can stop working, you're going to get paid for the rest of your life. That's dignity. Okay, and everybody behind the table had one of those, and 99% of them were because of unions. Then I looked up the whole day, left and right, back and forth. There was not one thing about unionization. Okay, so this is how much you make. Okay, this is where you work. What does it look like to say, hey, workers, how do we get together and try to increase that pay and get yourself a pension, get yourself some decent health benefits and things of that sort. And that is like a key element of all of this. So I'm all for empowerment, you know, teaching them the basics. But the question I have is like, why are we withholding this vital information from the kids at this reality check day where we got these people, some of them already on 1 or 2 pensions? And I just don't understand why that's not part of the discussion. I think it's largely because who put that up, who is in charge of reality check day becomes very important at the end of that. And really it should be the union. It should be, you know, workers. It should be the people. NAACP, Voz de la Frontera, these organizations should be able to have more say in how these days are run.
I definitely agree. And I think in my experience, like a lot of people not telling children things because they don't want them to not be a child anymore. So they try to keep them ignorant to things, which some things it works, then some things it doesn't. Because nowadays, these children are very intelligent. They already know a lot of the things, or know of a lot of the things that you are trying to hide from them. And it's better for you to teach them how to spend their money instead of them learning the hard way, like you might have had to do, or like I might have had to do, just like, oh, this is what you should do with your money. Teach them about high interest savings account instead of just putting it in just a checkings account, or teaching them how to do like how to pay bills and stuff. Because I know children and like high schoolers always talk about they're never taught that. But then when they're taught that, they don't teach the younger ones that. Right. So I think that's a big one, just passing it down and teaching these kids, and even if it's something that's not so child-friendly, put it in a child-friendly way.
I agree 100%. Look at, you know what, I want to tell you this. The Unified had a wonderful opportunity to rethink education in this community during this pandemic, and we didn't do it. I mean, let's just be honest, we didn't do it. So what you're saying is key. That education truly is a survival kit kind of thing, right? Like, how does this help me? A brilliant kid can do bad in school because it feels like this has nothing to do with what I'm about to do, exactly. Right? And so but this pandemic gave us this opportunity to really rethink it. How do we empower these families? How do we serve them? What is it that they need? Instead, now we're dealing with failing crisis at the high school level. There's more F's than there's ever been. Okay, well, that's the old system, which was barely working, onto a virtual setting, and it was working less. And so instead of trying to up our game, we dropped the ball. And now there's a lot of people who feel like instead of school being an empowering thing at this moment in the pandemic, it's actually an oppressive thing, which is making them feel like, ugh, you know, I have more weight on my shoulders because of the schools. And it's really unfortunate where we find ourselves.
Yeah, because I was really hoping for this pandemic to have a shift in a lot of things, but that was one of the big ones that I've seen with a lot of other students doing online school. Like they already had all this stuff going on, that a lot of the teachers just like, okay, here's assignment, here's another assignment, here's another assignment, instead of like sitting down like, okay, how are you guys all doing? Like, I know it's been hard, Like, do you guys need me to push back the deadlines? I know we gotta go, we have to make this deadline, but is there any accommodations I can make? And just being more vulnerable, because students can see that you are struggling, or if you're trying to cover up something, they can tell, they see right through everything. So it's like better for you to be vulnerable, notice, showing them that you're having a hard time as well as them, so they don't feel so isolated in all their struggles as students. Don't think like I know a lot of students are probably just like, man, it feels like I'm the only one going through all this stuff, but there's everybody else in your class, including your teacher, are going through the same thing, but they don't have conversations about it. I think it'd be very beneficial to have these conversations, and instead of like having a study hall where you just sit there, have these deeper conversations, open it up, even if somebody doesn't want to talk or put their camera on, let them speak in the chat, because there's so much things for these kids. They don't know how to express themselves, how to let loose, because they're going through just as much stress as the rest of us adults.
Yes.
But they're not as equipped as us to cope with it. So if we don't make the right choice, there's going to be a lot of damage to mental health coming forth.
That's right.
So with us trying to get out of this pandemic, we have to actually take the time out of us being at home with our families to sit down and have these conversations. So when it's time to go back out and we get really busy again, we can have some type of change all around.
That's right. That's good.
Anybody else want to add anything to the conversation? Or have any questions or anything?
Any question? This is what it feels like to teach.
Yeah, this is definitely how it is tutoring too.
Well, if they don't, I really appreciate the time.
No problem.
And
did you have anything else you wanted to add to?
no, just let's do our best to not blame individuals for the problems that we find ourselves in. I mean, that's the lesson we get from King. It's not, we can blame each other all we want, but ultimately it's not my fault. The question always has to be, what are we going to do? What are we going to do about it? Okay. So that's where I'll leave it.
Yeah, I definitely love that. Not getting caught up into what somebody did wrong, Think about the positive side. What can I do right? Something might have, like, and you never really know a person, honestly. You never know what they're going through. They might have had a death and now they're lashing out of grief. And another one to bridge the gap between people, like we talked in a previous conversation, just being more understanding, be a lot more gracious to people. Because obviously, you give them that grace, then if they take advantage of it, okay, we got to learn to set boundaries, especially with the kids at a younger age, teaching them how to set boundaries. Because even as adults, a lot of us don't know how to set boundaries, and it can lead to very unhealthy relationships, whether it be student-teacher, student to student, coworker to coworker.
You know what? You remind me of Fred Hampton. Fred Hampton said education is participation. Now, when I met you, I said that. But just, if you give a human the correct conditions, liberating conditions, they'll step up to it. If somebody starts acting weird, somebody starts acting like they're greedy, it's because something else is going on there. And that's what King taught us too, that humans, generally speaking, he had hope in humans. He had hope in humans, and I do too. And I hope that from the King Day we can all, kind of revive that. You have hope, and if people, just like you said, Eli, people are lashing out, there's something else happening. And there's a lot happening that is tough for a lot of people right now.
Yes. And we talked about a little bit on the last conversation, but did you have any ways that you cope, or people can cope during these hard times?
It's through action. I mean, so I've been meeting. For me, it's empowering, the Zoom, because I can be at 10 different places on one day rather than just having to go to one meeting, 2 meetings. But I've been doing all kinds of stuff. So just trying to organize people. When the pandemic was coming, I was organizing in the union, and when we got back, I was trying to organize with the students around what the school system. Just keep going. And this is the kind of thing my son's on too. And so it's just me and my son. He's having fun in the neighborhood while I'm trying to organize, community. And me meeting with people on Zoom is not as good is not as, deep of a relationship, but
Yeah.
constantly connecting with people has been the way I've kind of stayed sane through this whole thing.
I definitely can agree with that. Been having a lot of Zoom calls, and even when it comes to like my tutoring day to day, it can kind of get like in a routine of okay, I'm just going through the motions, just to make sure I'm present. I don't really do anything, but it really changes when you add to it because you never know. You might say something, someone else is like really, they might not say it, but they're like at home and just sitting here breaking down because it really resonated with them. And they needed that to get through their breakthrough. You never know what your words will mean to someone else or what your struggle will do for someone else. So I always think it's great to be vulnerable, even though it's hard, but there's always somebody else that's fighting to make it through another day that needs to hear what you have to say.
Mm-hmm.
So even if it's just something small, what you have to say is just as important as someone else.
That's right. That's right. All right. Well, what do you want? Should we let Nick go?
Yeah, I think if no one else has any questions, anything, we can switch to let Nick go.
Is he ready? Because it's early.
Yeah. Let's see. Is he?
I think I'm supposed to start at 3, so we can take a half-hour break.
Yeah. We can take a half-hour break. Then we'll turn at 3.
Great job, Aaron. Really enjoyed hearing your words today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And
Okay.
we will come back at 3.